Welcome to a new episode of Coptic Civilization. I'm Michael Saad. Our segment today is about Archdeacon Habib Girgis, who was born in 1876 and departed this world in 1951. He was mentor, or the mentor, of His Holiness Pope Shenouda III. Pope Shenouda described him as the light of the Coptic Church from 1900 through the first 50 years of the 20th century. Our guest today is His Grace Bishop Suriel of Melbourne, Australia. We are honored, Your Grace, to have you accept our humble invitation to Your Grace to honor us and speak about Habib Girgis.
It's a great blessing to be here and to speak about this very interesting figure in our modern history.
His Grace Bishop Suriel is preparing his PhD work on the life and work of Habib Girgis, and what a better expert on the subject, but also because His Grace spent enormous amount of time with His Holiness Pope Shenouda, learning from him the interface and impressions and discipleship of His Holiness Pope Shenouda III to Archdeacon Habib Girgis and his personality. What did Pope Shenouda in particular tell you about Habib Girgis?
Well, His Holiness Pope Shenouda III had a great love for Archdeacon Habib Girgis, and he studied with him at the Theological College near the end of the life of Archdeacon Habib Girgis. But I had the opportunity once in New York to interview His Holiness, and he spoke to me a little bit about his relationship with him and the work that he did with respect to the Sunday school movement and in its establishment, and also about he was the editor-in-chief of a very important religious journal called The Vine, or El Karma, and also his work as the dean of the Theological College. But he also told me that Habib Girgis really taught himself a lot of what he knew, because there was not many people in his time that were theologically trained. So when he entered into the Theological College in 1893, when it was established, and he was one of the first students that studied there, there was hardly any religious scholars or theological scholars that were able to teach, and so he took it upon himself to do a lot of the reading in the patriarchal library at that time. So it was not an easy beginning for Archdeacon Habib Girgis, but His Holiness always said that there was a darkness over the earth, as mentioned in the book of Genesis, and then God said, let there be light, and that light was Habib Girgis, because Pope Shenouda felt that the way to remove that darkness was through bringing theological education into the life of the church, and he was a great preacher as well, Habib Girgis, and he began to train students in the Theological College that could also begin to preach and to remove the ignorance that was there amongst the community and the many negative things that were happening at that time.
The appreciation of His Holiness Pope Shenouda III for Habib Girgis, in part was, or in particular, was due to the fact, perhaps, that both Habib Girgis and Pope Shenouda were responsible for Coptic education over a period of time. And as, of course, His Holiness Pope Shenouda was the bishop for education before becoming a patriarch. And he, of course, Pope Shenouda established so many seminaries around the world, perhaps over 25 of them in between Egypt and outside Egypt. And but one important aspect of Habib Girgis in terms of education, besides the theological college and preaching around the country, Egypt, and creating career preachers, is also his establishment of the Sunday school movement, which is also educational for the young and the youth. What is the role of Habib Girgis in establishing the Sunday school system in Egypt?
Well, I mean, I think that was the beginning for him. There was a decree from Pope Cyril V. They saw that there was a danger for the future survival of the Coptic Church and its dogma and its tradition and faith, because missionaries had begun to come into the country, in particular from America, Protestant missionaries from the Presbyterian Church, and also Catholic missionaries that were sent from Rome. And so the church hierarchy realized that there was something important needed to be done for Coptic education, the establishment of Coptic schools, and indeed putting a curriculum together to be able to educate the young. And so Habib Girgis really took it upon himself to begin working in this field after he had completed his theological degree at the seminary, and began to look at curriculum, and he actually wrote some very important curriculum. He had an important role to play in making sure that this curriculum of Sunday school or religious education would also be taught to our students in the public schools, and he played an important role in this. And also he made sure that this curriculum was spread all over Egypt and Sudan. And not only this, but he had an important role to educate the teachers that would actually teach this curriculum through the theological college later, when he became its dean in 1918. But it was not easy to be able to convince people of all of this, and he was met with a lot of resistance. But he devoted and dedicated all of his life. I really sometimes wonder when Habib Girgis used to sleep, when I read the amount and wealth of material that he produced was quite remarkable.
Yes.
The letters of correspondence, the reports that he wrote, the administrative system that he put for the Sunday school movement, I think we can learn a lot from it today.
Speaking of his many publications, which I believe like over 30 books,
yes.
And hundreds of songs, he was a poet. Like they say that His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, somebody told me, was a mirror image of Habib Girgis, at least in some certain respects. You agree, Your Grace?
Well, I think there is lots of similarities between them, no doubt, and I think Pope Shenouda was definitely inspired by the work and the example that Habib Girgis and the legacy that he left for the church. I think I remember once His Holiness saying that every time that he met with Archdeacon Habib Girgis, he would make sure that he would have a booklet or a notebook that he could write all of the words that Habib Girgis would say, and they became an important part of the vision that he put for the church as well.
Yeah. Returning to the point of his 30 volumes, this book in Arabic الوسائل العملية للإصلاحات القبطية آمال وأحلام يمكن تحقيقها في 10 أعوام, which translates practical means for Coptic reform. Dreams and hopes that can be achieved in 10 years. He believed in planning, and he achieved it. And speaking of this book, please correct me if I'm wrong, Your Grace. In 1928, Archdeacon Habib Girgis was nominated to be a patriarch. And that while he was an archdeacon, he was not a monk, he was not a priest. And that describes the caliber or the respect of people who nominated him. In 1942, when the patriarchal seat was vacant once again, people thought of renominating him, but he decided to write this book instead, which to me looked like an agenda for whoever becomes a patriarch. What do you think about, is Habib Girgis in general relevant today? And if this book is relevant today, and if it is part of your study?
Well, he wrote this book near the end of his life, so he had gone through a long, painful journey. He wanted to achieve so much. He was so proud of his church and wanted to see his people to be lifted up to a very high level, to value their Coptic civilization and heritage, because for a long period of time there was a period of darkness and lack of education in the church, and he wanted to raise that standard. But he didn't have an easy journey. He was met with a lot of resistance along the way. He wanted to get the theological college up to an international standard, and he was not able to achieve this. Even the building that he was in was a dilapidated building, and he had to spend a lot of money, and there was not enough finances to get it up to the standard that he desired for it, and to get the students and the staff up to that standard. But he did, in my opinion, a great work and left a great legacy for the church. I think this book is certainly very relevant. You know, one of the things that Archdeacon Habib Girgis calls for in this book is that no priest or no clergyman should be ordained to the priesthood without completing a theological degree. I still think we haven't got there yet, but I think we have to reread this book and see the legacy that this very fascinating and inspiring man left for the church. You know, he wanted to have a whole series of departments to look at the importance of family life and how to improve the family unit and education within it. A department to do with education and teaching in the church. Another department to do with theological education in particular. Media, he gave attention to media and to publishing and printing. The life of the monks and improving their lives and their education, because from them would come the hierarchy of the church. To look at the Holy Synod and its work, and what the Holy Synod should be doing in its role, and the vision that it should have. So I think it's a very important book which we should study and build upon to bring it up to what is required for the church. Of course, has changed over many decades to where it is today in the 21st century. But certainly I think it is a good foundation for us to build upon. And I think he was certainly a man ahead of his time, and he had a great vision, and he left a great legacy for the church. And I don't believe we have given him enough attention and study of really what this man was about. We give him a lot of lip service, and And we know, we hear very little about him, that he established Sunday school, that he was dean of the theological college, that he wrote several dozen books, but not much more is known. I think we need to delve more in deeply. I found thousands of pages in the patriarchal archives of his correspondence, of many of his reports that he wrote on the Sunday school and on the theological college. The struggles that he went through his personal correspondence, all of this will come out in the research, hopefully, and we can have a better idea of who was Habib Girgis and what was the message and the legacy that he left for us.
I cannot wait until your dissertation gets published and would be available to the public. And for example, I'm sure you will cover this in the book, in the dissertation. Besides the plan, he lays the philosophical and theological and spiritual foundation of the plan. So it's still valid, isn't it, today?
Yeah, I think
at least the philosophy.
Definitely, and it needs to be studied well, as I said, and it's a good foundation for the church to look at for what are its needs today in the 21st century.
His spiritual stature, beside being a mentor and educational pioneer, he was also a deeply spiritual person, as Your Grace mentioned. And I was not surprised, but delighted completely that in the 40th day memorial of His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, one of the bishops read the poem that His Holiness wrote it to honor Habib Girgis. It starts in Arabic with وَأَبٌ أَنْتَ وَنَحْنُ يَا أَبِي عَلَى صَدْرِكَ عِشْنَا نَحْبُ. You are our father, Habib Girgis, to Pope Shenouda, and we lived in your bosom and grew up and were nourished. So, and he presented the poem as he said, there is nothing better to talk about His Holiness Pope Shenouda more than the poem that Pope Shenouda himself wrote it about Habib Girgis. What an honor to both figures.
Yeah, it is. And you see a lot of similarities when you read the poem, and what Pope Shenouda wrote about Habib Girgis certainly applies in exactly the same way, if not more, with His Holiness Pope Shenouda III.
It's amazing that Your Grace is like third generation after Habib Girgis. And you looked back and admired him and dedicated your research work and educational activities to the legacy of Habib Girgis in order to present that role model to your generation and the next generations to come. And so they look back and see, oh, God remembered us in 1900 and sent such a figure. And
I think I'm very humbled, when I delve more and read more about his life and his works, and yet at the same time I feel very inspired of what we can learn from this man for the future of the church and the young people that don't know about this figure. I think they can be inspired as well to know how God sent this man at the right time. Who knows, if it was not Habib Girgis, what may have happened to the Coptic Church during that period?
What a question. Really, a question that is striking, and it's just such a figure that God sent as a messenger for a particular mission, and he achieved it successfully with God's grace. When I was like 10 years old, I found this book in my father's library, and I devoured it at age 10. And because it's really written as a dream. And so for a child at 8, or a young person at age 10, I devoured it. And then many years later, decades later, I thought that we should reprint it. And it was reprinted recently and is available. If I may mention one ripple effect of Habib Girgis, just to give a striking example. The legacy of His Holiness Pope Kyrillos the sixth, can be traced to Habib Girgis. And that's what I learned from my father, that Habib Girgis educated in the theological college young men who became priests around Egypt. One of them was Mr. Yusuf Megalli. Mr. Yusuf Megalli became a preacher in Alexandria in 1920, and one of his students was a young man who became Pope Kyrillos the Sixth. And my father was also one of the disciples of Abuna Yusuf Megalli. So without the ministry of Habib Girgis, Abuna Yusuf became later Abuna Yusuf Megalli of St. Mark Church Cathedral in Alexandria for 50 years or more. And his disciples became priests and even a patriarch, one of the important saints of the 20th century, Pope Kyrillos VI. So by ripple effect, you can say that so much, as Your Grace mentioned, what would have been of the Coptic Church and Coptic community and worldwide Coptic presence today if Habib Girgis was not there, and God did not work through him.
And that's why, I really believe that it's important that a proper academic study is made of this period in the history of the Church, and also of this interesting figure, Archdeacon Habib Girgis, and his life and works.
Thank you so much, Your Grace, for enlightening us with the great life of Archdeacon Habib Girgis. And if you would kindly give us a concluding remark.
I think Archdeacon Habib Girgis left for us and for the Church a very important legacy of the importance of theological education and religious education that the Church needs to study carefully today and look at the legacy that he left for us and how we can use that as a foundation to build upon in the 21st century.
Thank you so much, Your Grace.
Thank you.
You have been watching Coptic Civilization with a special segment on Archdeacon Habib Girgis with His Grace Bishop Suriel of Melbourne. See you next week. I'm Michael Saad.
Wow.